mean, the reason we launched that newsletter is that we developed this like very clear understanding that what a lot of people needed was just ideas for a Tuesday. You know, they're busy. They don't want to spend an hour and a half cooking dinner on a weeknight. Maybe they have young kids at home. Maybe they just have a demanding professional life and they don't actually love to cook. Not everyone loves to cook. And those people needed better service from us.
You're listening to the Taste Podcast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Matt Rodbard, here with Senior Editor Anna Hezel.
Emily Weinstein is the food and cooking editor of The New York Times. She also writes the weekly newsletter 5 Weeknight Dishes, which is awesome. I'm a subscriber. Matt, what did you and Emily talk about?
Anna, it's an understatement of the century to say that we're major fans of the New York Times cooking and food section here. We read literally every story every week in print and online, and we subscribe to the newsletters. So it was really fun having Emily in to talk about all the things that we want to talk about, which includes how the extremely high quality sausage is made at the New York Times food desk. We talked about her early career and how she rose from a restaurant reviews listing editor into the role of boss. We also speak about how she developed stories with her amazing stable of writers, many who have appeared on the Taste Podcast. The New York Times food desk, if you've not subscribed, you have to do it.
Here's Matt talking to Emily.
Emily Weinstein, welcome to the Taste Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I have to say, Anna and I are such fans of what you do at the New York Times, longtime readers, longtime subscribers, but also you as a person. You've supported Taste. You've been the little notes and just seeing you at events. We really thank you for that. Thank
you. It's so sincere. I remember I think it was the first time I actually met you in person, and I was like, I feel like I'm meeting someone from one of my favorite bands. And I just really have appreciated what y'all been doing for years now.
So kind, and I want to get into your story because it's a really good one. Before you joined the New York Times in the food desk, you are the food and cooking editor of the New York Times.
Yes,
you're
yes.
the boss. You're an MFA student and grad at Columbia. So how did you get from MFA Columbia to the New York Times food desk?
So, first of all, you don't need an MFA to work at a newspaper, but I do have one. And so I was working at the Village Voice, and it was just clear there were changes there. The Voice was about to be sold, and I had a friend who was at Columbia, and I always loved to write, and I knew that what I wanted to do was either write or be an editor, or an editor who wrote, or some combination of the two. And so I ended up in this program at Columbia, in nonfiction writing, and loved it, totally loved it. And then at the end of my coursework, I still had to write a master's thesis. Basically, I have to write a book. And I just needed a freelance job, to support myself while I was still paying Columbia in order to write this thesis. And I happened to run into a friend of mine who you might know, JJ Good. He's a cookbook author.
Sure, a columnist for Taste, longtime contributor.
Columnist for Taste, that's right. So I just happened to know JJ, and I ran into him, and he and JJ and his wife and I are old friends. And I said, yeah, I'm just looking for a freelance job, copy editing, fact checking. That was the sort of work I had done before I went to grad school. And he had heard about some random freelance fact checking job at the New York Times. And I was like, great, sounds great. And I figured it must be for the magazine. I mean, who else at the Times would be fact checking? Newspapers don't really do that. But it turned out to be for the food section. And I went to the Times, and this was at the old building on 43rd Street. The Times used to have this office that really looked like a newspaper from the movies, and a newsroom for the movies. And I met Pete Wells, who was the food editor then, and Trish Hall, who oversaw the feature sections, and spoke with them. And they hired me to fact check the restaurant listings database.
Yes.
Which is
what a grind.
Is not a good job, but it was a job. I really needed a job, and it was at the New York Times, and I got a pass. I could go to the office and work at the office. And I remember the first day I went to the office, and I loved restaurants. And at The Voice, I had worked with Robert Sietsema. One of my tasks at The Voice was to fact check Robert Sietsema's column, the food critic there. So
counterculture?
Yeah. So I had this real love of what he did. I loved restaurants. I loved eating out. But I had never really thought about being a food writer or editor. It just wasn't in my frame of reference, really. And I got there and I looked around and I was like, oh.
These are my people.
I was like, oh, this is good. And I just resolved, I was like, I'm gonna work like crazy and hopefully I'll get to stay.
And so what a cool story. And I feel starting from the bottom now we're here, some moment with this story because you really did work your way up. What were some of the jobs after you were, fact-checking the restaurant listings? What were some of the other jobs you held on the food desk?
So when I got hired on staff at the Times, I actually did not get hired on the food desk, but I got hired on the culture desk, which is those are the art sections of the paper, like the daily art sections, arts and leisure.
Mm-hmm.
But they needed somebody to do their listings, and they're like, "Well, you're already doing the restaurant listings. You're checking this database." And by the way, at the time, the Times did not really care about its recipe database. They were sitting on this archive of recipes going back to 1981. And they just were totally focused on the restaurant listings. And I understood why. I mean, I still understand why. So they hired me to do the listings, and they hired me in a job that doesn't exist anymore, a web producer.
Oh, yeah.
And back then—
Remember those, right? CMS management?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The CMS. I mean, I've been through so many CMSs at the New York Times. And the job then was basically you had all these writers and editors who, made the newspaper. They put together the New York Times, and then it went to the printing plant and everybody went home. And the web producers were there just like elves in Santa's workshop, putting it all on the
Control-C,
internet.
Control-V style.
Yeah. Nobody had any idea what we did or who we were or what even happened. But it all ended up on nytimes.com. So, and that was my job, and I focused on the listing. So I was always working with the food section, including I helped launch a blog that Mark Bittman wrote at the time. So very early on, I was working really closely with Mark Bittman of all people, which is an amazing education. And then some time passed, and I got more involved with the culture desk and the arts coverage. And then the web producer job on the food desk opened up, and back then it was the dining section. So I moved over there.
Wow.
And I've really been there ever since.
What year are we talking about? Did you make that switch over?
Oh my gosh. Time is a river. I've just been doing this for so long. I want to say 2009, probably.
What an interesting time for digital media for food. Eater is really just starting to pick up steam. You've got places, City Search and Metro Mix, where I work. We're doing listing stuff, and then there's all sorts of blogs. All sorts of blogs. I mean, and Grub Street. And, of course, Grub Street, of course. Yeah.
And a big reason the Times was really interested in those restaurant listings is because New York Magazine had a really robust listings database. Also, is it Foursquare? Do you remember Foursquare? Foursquare. And this is before Yelp really took off in New York. I think Yelp was happening in San Francisco at that point. There were just all these different players in digital food space, especially restaurants, and especially listings. This idea of hey, can we tell people where to go eat?
Yeah, it's really changed so much, and the way the recipe has kind of changed over time. And I say most legacy media, quote unquote legacy media places, did not put all their database on the internet. Gourmet is a great example too, right?
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to your current job, which is running cooking and food, they're two very different aspects. I'd like to hear about the difference. But also, I'd like to hear about your day-to-day. What is it like running the food desk, running the cooking app, all of these different aspects of the New York Times food section? It's really cool, impressive too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun because everyone's so excited about it. Yeah. Internally, externally, there's just a lot of momentum and excitement around what we're doing in food at the Times and NYT Cooking. My day-to-day is a lot of meetings, which I think, in between those years of being a web producer and what I do now, I was an editor. I edited stories and all kinds of stuff. And And so now I don't edit as much as I used to, which, was my first love, but that's cool. But I do talk with people all day, which is really interesting. And the meetings really reflect sort of the vast array of things that we are up to right now. So, I'll sit at my desk, I'll read some things. I usually call into the New York Times newsroom morning news meeting. It used to be called the Page One meeting.
Page One meeting, of course, famous, yeah.
Yep, there's a documentary about it. So I call into that meeting and just get a sense of the news of the day, but as told by the editors running those departments before the news is online. So, the Washington editor is talking about the stories they're following, international editor, whatever the biggest news story of the day is the person
Sarah
that
Palin dining in a restaurant without a mask, having COVID, maybe?
Yep, maybe that. So, and we have editors to go to that meeting too. So,
Yeah.
So usually I start the day just listening in on that, getting a sense of what's going on. We have a staff meeting every morning just for the editors and reporters who do in the newsroom, in the food desk and cooking, sort of the editorial part of the cooking team. We just catch up. We have brainstorm sessions. We have ideas meetings. I go to meetings with the cooking product leadership team.
Yeah.
So that's, I represent the editorial part of the operation, but, dozens and dozens of people work on NYT Cooking, engineers, designers, product managers.
Which is a real business for the Times.
Yeah,
NYT Cooking, the app.
Huge business for the Times. They announced in December we passed 1 million subscribers.
Amazing.
For cooking.
Congrats. So cool.
Thank you. Hey, nobody ever thought that would be possible for a recipe website. So we're pretty excited about that. But I speak with those people. I speak with the marketing people. I speak with I go to meetings with the other leaders of the other features desks at the Times, culture styles. I meet with writers on our team. I meet with writers outside the paper, all kinds of stuff all the time.
It sounds like the meetings take over your life with any job of leadership that's the case. But also, it sounds like you are an editor at heart, and you want to make sure the stories are executed. Do you dip in with your pen once in a while?
I do. It's. I think you have to kind of let people. Every editor is going to edit a story a little differently, and you have to let people do what they're going to do. But yeah, I read our stories before they go live for the most part. Sometimes some get by me, but I really try to read them all at least. And usually I'm like, great. And then every once in a while I'm like, I'm not sure about this. And, we kind of go from there.
I'm sure what you're not saying too is that your staff comes to you with like the hard questions too, because I'm sure that there are. You're not covering just cooking. Like, to be clear to our listeners, the culture aspect of food covered in New York Times is tremendous. Priya Krishna, friend of Taste and contributor, is doing some of the work. Eric Kim as well. It's just like reporting on the world of food. So I'm sure you have some tough. Were there any tough decisions? Not getting into any specifics, but like, what types of questions do you get often?
Well, and in addition, so just a little more context there. So we're producing NYT Cooking, right? So this is this enormous recipe resource, this app. But we're also producing investigations.
Sure.
2 of our reporters won a Pulitzer for their Me Too coverage with the reporting on Ken Friedman and the Spotted Pig. It was Kim Severson and Julia Moskin, amazing reporters. So we're doing investigations, reporting news about the restaurant industry. We're writing feature stories about food culture in America. Yeah. We're producing restaurant criticism. We're doing all kinds of things. Tough questions. Usually it's sort of about picking our shots. Where are we going to put our energy? Where are we going to put our resources? How do we want to shape the story? We're also just one part of the New York Times, So is it like, well, should we do this, or should we see if Metro's going to do it? Or should we do this, or is Biz going to cover it? That's the business desk. So there's a lot of that, like understanding like, how are we going to proceed on something tricky, or how do we want to think about this tricky thing, and how are we going to move forward on it?
Makes a lot of sense. We have to pick our battles too at Taste. It's important when you have limited resources. You can't do every story, and you have to like pick your swings. You mentioned reviews, and I have to ask: do you go to any review meals with Pete? Pete's been on the podcast when we've talked about his process and his deadline anxiety, as everyone has. But do you go to dine with him?
I have in the past. Sadly, I don't go anywhere anymore
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now because
Yeah,
of COVID. I dine out I'm not dining with anyone so much right now, but
Yeah.
I did before COVID. Not a ton, but I go out with Pete sometimes. Pete, if you hear this, I am available again. The last
Throw some time on my cow. It can be after 5. It could be 5:30.
I love it's really look, it is really fun to go out to eat with Pete. I just really enjoy talking with Pete. I think he's a remarkable thinker and so interesting and fun to talk to. He's so funny. And last time I ate with Pete, I'm trying to remember, I think it was in 2019. We went to the 2nd Avenue Deli.
Wow.
And it was not for a review. I remember meeting him, and we were supposed to go somewhere nearby, and the place was closed unexpectedly. And he was like, for Pete, every meal kind of has to count. He has to eat at so many restaurants in order to do the work that he does. So we're like, all right, well, how are we going to salvage this? And we just walked over to the 2nd Avenue Deli, and I'm pretty sure we had pastrami sandwiches and celeries and pickles. I'm sure I had matzo ball soup. I can't imagine leaving the 2nd Avenue Deli without having matzo ball soup. So yeah, it was not a review meal, but it was great. It was a great meal.
I've had the pleasure of dining with him as well, and he is really. He was a culture editor before food, so he obviously has a lot of great taste in music and film and just cool dude. And I'm waiting for my invite too, Pete, as well. So if you're listening,
Pete, we're here.
I have to talk about you as a writer because you write a weekly newsletter as well in addition to all this work called 5 Weeknight Dishes. And I love it. It's really well written. It's very tightly packaged and you're an editor at heart. Do you get deadline anxiety? Every week you got to do this thing?
No. Writing requires a muscle and you work the muscle every week. It's if you try to get on a treadmill and run a mile and you haven't done it in a long time, it's going to be really hard. You do it several times a week. You're going to be fine. And but I am a terrible procrastinator.
Who isn't?
I know, but I'm bad. And I'm not supposed to be bad, right? I'm supposed to be good. I need to be the change I want to see in the world around deadlines and procrastination. But no, I just know it's just something I have to do. And it's something I love to do.
Yeah.
For me, it keeps me writing and I'm not a recipe developer. I'm not a culinary professional. I'm an editor. I'm a writer and I'm an editor who loves food. I'm quite a passionate home cook, and so really I'm just a fan. So it keeps me really closely tied to the recipe development work we do at NYT Cooking, I'm just constantly cooking from the app. I want to know what our writers are doing. I want to know what's new. I want to know what's interesting. And then I get to tell people about it. So, and it also keeps me close to readers. I think it's a way of sort of showing appreciation for them and their needs. The reason we launched that newsletter is that we developed this very clear understanding that what a lot of people needed was just ideas for a Tuesday. They're busy. They don't want to spend an hour and a half cooking dinner on a weeknight. Maybe they have young kids at home. Maybe they just have a demanding professional life and they don't actually love to cook. Not everyone loves to cook. And those people needed better service from us.
And you just edit it in a cool way where you pick the right things and you say the right words. It really is encouraging. And I wish you would write more, to be honest, because just talking to you, you've got a lot to say.
Oh, thank you.
I mean it.
I love writing and I always loved writing. And it was one of the only things I ever did where I would lose the time. I would lose track of time. Such is my love of sitting there and doing it. However, it's really hard to just sit and do it, and that's the procrastination,
Speaking of writing and writers, your team has greatly expanded in the past couple of years. You've scooped up amazing talents. Some are familiar for taste: Pri Krishna, Eric Kim, Christina Morales, Genevieve Coe as an editor, Brett Anderson. I just want to say and ask you, what makes a New York Times reporter and why do you hire somebody?
Oh, such a good question. And those are all extraordinary talents, right?
Sure.
Just and extraordinarily skilled. It's not just about talent; it's about skill and work. And a really great New York Times reporter. First of all, again, reporting is a craft. Reporting is a skill. People who have really honed honed those skills and worked at their craft. People who know how to spot a story, know how to shape a story for a national audience, are sort of fearless in thinking about stories. And, you also have to be a good writer. Yeah. And you have to file on deadline. So it really is a tall order. You have to be able to work quickly, and to be able to do that, at the level that the Times wants to be working, it's hard. And also, these are people who all really understand the food space, whether it's home cooking or the food industry or cookbooks. They all bring some sort of specialty in terms of how they approach the beat.
It's a remarkable blend of skills, and you've said it so well. And I just want to add just the weight of having the New York Times as your byline is there. And I've written for the Times. There's an absolute there's a serious dedication to the byline and really the masthead, I guess you could say. So I think the fact that you put out so much with this pressure is remarkable.
Thanks. Hey, it's the job. And it's too bad we're not all like physically in the newsroom at the office. I don't know if you've ever been there. You should come.
I've never been, actually. I've seen it in film and television.
No, you should come when
and winning Pulitzers.
when we can have people come again, you should come. Cool. There's just this tremendous energy there, especially at the end of the day when deadline is approaching. It's really cool, and it really helps carry you along.
How do you develop your stories with your staff? I know that you said you have ideas meetings, and then so you self-generate, you and your editorial staff, but are you also accepting pitches from like a Priya Krishna writer? Is she pitching you ideas, or Eric? How's that work?
Yeah, well, it comes about a couple different ways. First of all, if news is breaking, it's breaking, and we're looking to see like, okay, which of our reporters can handle it right now? Oh, that's another skill. You have to be able to do breaking news, which is hard, No
one really does it in food. I mean, Eater does it really well too, but it's very rare.
Yeah, and hey, look, there's not a ton of breaking news in food the way there is on like Metro. You cover the city, you cover the courts, or there's breaking news. We don't have as much breaking news, but it definitely happens. And so if news comes, that's one thing. We have ideas meetings for sure, and assignments come out of that. I will say the best ideas, reliably come from reporters. And most of the time they're discussing them kind of with each other, with their colleagues, and principally, with their editor. And thinking about, okay, are we going to do this? When are we going to do it? Just working out the logistics and also sort of shaping it. And, and that makes perfect sense to me that more ideas would come from reporters and writers than from editors. COVID has, messed with this a little bit. But generally speaking, like, you don't find ideas at your desk. You don't find ideas at the office. You can from reading. Obviously, the internet, there are stories there. But really the best ideas come from being out in the world and talking to people.
We call it pre-reporting, and when we take on pitches, we require it. I mean, what you're saying is what we experience every day. Like we get an idea, but it's like you need to pre-report it. It's just so important. But you bring up COVID, and Anna and I struggle with this too. It's like you can't get out in the world as much.
Yeah, no, it's really, really hard. It's hard. And that's why you get ideas from people. And look, like, absolutely, you need to cover food culture online, and like you don't need to be out in the world to cover food culture online, but we don't just do that. We do all kinds of things. In order for the report to feel dynamic, you need people who are out in the world looking around, bringing those stories, to you. The editors, I think, do a really good job of thinking about sort of like big picture lines of coverage, packages, big projects, sort of franchise ideas. Editors, I think, are really good at sort of conceiving of those and thinking about like, okay, like here is this bucket, and like what are we putting in it, and how do we want to think about that?
Without spoiling any surprises, what are you working on right now? Are there any topics that you feel like you've had across your desk this past couple of weeks that you want to talk about?
Well, we like the element of surprise.
Yes,
so
as
we do have a few really big things planned for 2022 that I can't talk about yet, but this is tantalizing. It's going to be great. Personally, of course, the big stories to me this year are the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? You know, and there's so many different storylines that thread through the restaurant industry. And then climate change. And climate change coverage in food, you know, has persisted all these many years through COVID. But there was this huge moment in 2019 where there was quite a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And then in 2020, the focus shifted because COVID was such a shock to the whole world, to the whole system. And, you know, all the while we've been producing stories that touch on climate change, but I think in a more concerted way. We're going to come back to it this year.
What makes a good climate change food story? I ask this because we are pitched them often. We can't publish as much as you, but we try to publish as much climate change coverage. It is the biggest story of our generation right now in food. But we've struggled with finding an audience, and it's just sometimes it's either people don't want to hear or read about certain topics. Sometimes it's too obscure, or sometimes it's too, like, if you watch Don't Look Up, it's too far in the future. So what makes a good story?
Oh, you know, and I should say, too, the Times has a whole desk devoted to climate change coverage.
You do.
So, and they're always doing work, and there's climate coverage across almost all the desks at the Times in various ways. So institutionally, you know, it's a priority and a big story, one among many, but a priority. You know, I think you're right. It's too abstract. There's this impending sense of doom, but it's just too hard to wrap your heads around. And maybe that's just the limit of the human mind. I don't know. But, you know, we see a lot of stories about waste, and we see a lot of stories about agricultural shifts. I actually find the agricultural shift stories compelling because it's like, oh my God, like Vermont is going to have the climate of North Carolina, and what are they going to grow there? Things like that, you know, because it conjures an image in my mind. I think something that I find missing from a lot of climate coverage is actually just actionable information. I think part of that is because actionable information is so confused and confusing, and it you know, it's very easy to feel hopeless. It's like, well, what does it mean if I give up X, Y, or Z? Like, does that really make a difference? And somebody over here is saying, well, no, it's really about policy, but you still want to do something, and I think about that a lot, and I think about, okay, you know, we report. We also provide service. Like NYT Cooking is service. And how do we bring some of that thinking into how we think about climate change?
Why it's such an interesting job that you have, because you do blend pure service journalism and like how to put dinner on the table, quote unquote, with like big ideas and big swings. And it's remarkable. I want to know, outside of the Times staff, is there anybody in food writing that you have enjoyed? Anybody on Twitter even? I know you don't have time to read everybody, but I always want to give editors a chance to kind of give a little shout out.
Well, I mean, I think Helen Rosner at the New Yorker is just like a genius. I mean, and like
big fan, friend,
everything
on the
she's
show.
done. I don't really know. I mean, I don't really know Helen. I've like met her once or twice in passing. So I'm just a fan. And everything she does, even, you know, she'll post an Instagram story about something, and something that is kind of percolating, but it's in the air, and she finds a way to talk about it in ways that are compelling and funny, and you know, she's just a genius. I really admire her work. Solejo.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's been really thrilling to see what Solejo is doing in San Francisco. I mean, she's just doing the job totally differently from anyone who's done the job before. Those are the two people who really come to mind. Who I don't work with. I love all the New York Times writers.
As do we. No, I think Soleil deserves a shout out. And I think she is doing it differently. I think the way she covers San Francisco and the Bay Area as a critic jumps outside of like just reviewing restaurants, and you know, she's extremely creative. I have to just say that, outside of having great taste and just really doing the job and putting in the work, great taste.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, she just really conceived of the job differently, and it's really exciting to sort of track, like, oh wow, you know, just the way she's doing it. I read quite a lot. I mean, mostly like in my free time, I'm not reading about food. I read a lot of fiction. I read, you know, there are a lot of Times writers who don't work for food who I'm just kind of obsessed with, and I'll read anything they write. So
Yeah, I love that answer. Let's talk about your own home cooking because I want to dive into you are a passionate home cook. You say you're not professional, but I think by now you know your way around a home kitchen. So in general, what excites you personally as a home cook? And then I guess the second part of the question is, as an editor, are there any home cooking concepts or trends that you really want to acknowledge as like something you're interested in?
So what excites me as a home cook is just the days when I feel excited to cook. And I only say that because, of COVID, I mean, there were days where I was like, I never want to walk into this kitchen.
Oh my gosh,
again.
right? Oh.
So like when I start to feel excited, that alone is like, yeah, and I do feel like I was pretty confident before COVID. I do feel like my cooking has gotten a lot better just because cooking is another craft and it just rewards repetition. Yeah. And I see that in my own cooking. I see the improvements and I'm really excited about them. And they're like tiny things and they're easy things for a professional cook. Like nobody would even think about this if you were a professional cook. But for me, like, I'm self-taught, I'm a home cook. It's great. What I'm excited about, so I am in a certain exclusive bean club.
Oh, right.
The Rancho Gordo Bean Club, which I coincidentally happened to sign up for before the pandemic. So I'm just like constantly looking in my cabinet and being like, oh my God, I have all these things to use up. And some of these are beans I've cooked with forever. And some of them I like never cooked with and never would have bought myself. It just wouldn't have occurred to me. And so I feel like I'm constantly kind of looking at what's in my cabinet and being like, all right. I mean, it's the same way I think people used to talk about their CSA boxes.
Yeah.
I also, my husband and I decided a while ago, like, hey, we really have to eat less meat, which is really, that was a personal choice. Truly wouldn't push it on anybody, my choice. And I realized pretty recently that like, we used to really have to think about it. I might not shock you to learn I do all the meal planning in our home. And I
definitely no shocker.
Yep. My husband can cook actually, but this is revealing. People often assume that my husband can't cook.
That's bullshit, man.
It is bullshit.
That's bullshit. It shouldn't be the case. I think that a healthy partnership, you're chipping in, and that's a modern household. And
yeah. People assume he's like, oh, he must not cook. I was like, fucking cooks.
Yeah, dude.
But I do plan the meals, and I'm happy to do it, and I'd rather do that than like clean the bathroom. So I in the beginning, when thinking about changing our eating habits, I used to have to think about it a lot. And I realized pretty recently that I don't have to think about it much anymore. Like the transition has been made and it's just the way a habit sort of settles into your life. And that was actually a really cool moment for me to think like, oh, like
we're there. We're not cooking with as much meat, right? We're there. Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be something I had to think about. And now it's just like I look at, what I bought, I look at what I'm thinking about cooking and I'm like, and that feels good.
It's a great feeling. And like, let's go back to the beans because I'm also a Rancho Gordo head myself. I'm not in the club. I am on the waiting list, but I do have quite a bit of stock. And so what I've been doing the 15-minute hard boil. So after like a 2 to 3 hour soak, I never plan like 12 to 24 hours at a time. I do a hard boil for 15 minutes. But backing up, I usually do like onion and I've been doing lemon a lot and just searing lemon peel and shallot and then a lot of spices and variety, mostly chilies, ancho. So are you 15-minute hard boil? Let's talk beans. Let's go there.
So I've been futzing around with this for a little bit because for a while I was just like putting them in the Instant Pot.
Word. Yeah.
I was just putting them in the Instant Pot and figuring it out. And cooking, I would cook a lot. I would cook the whole pound. Now I'm just cooking a half pound at a time. But
it's pretty wasteful when you go to the full pound. Yeah,
well, I use them all up. But by the time we're done with them, I'm like, oh my God, I don't eat this anymore. So I was doing the Instant Pot, but you get really inconsistent results with the Instant Pot, and I have finally accepted that. And I do it sometimes, like even, I don't know, 2 nights ago. Can't even remember what I was going to cook for dinner, but for some reason it did not come to fruition. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to go downstairs. I'm going to put the black beans in the Instant Pot. We have tortillas, we have chilies, we have this, we have that, put together a pretty tasty dinner, and the beans were fine, But now I'm doing like when I cook them on the stovetop, I actually do try to soak them. I know you don't have to. I do.
Yeah.
And then I'll do like a 10-minute hard boil, and then I'll go to a low simmer and I'll cover the pot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I do salt. I know some people don't. I know this is controversial.
Do you salt right away, or you don't salt at the end? You salt before?
I salt
or salt throughout.
I salt the cooking water.
Yeah.
I salt the cooking water, and then I salt at the end. I'm not salting all the way through. But some people would say don't salt.
Some people would say don't salt until the very last moment, or even upon serving, and let the diner, the person eating, salt. But I'm with you. I need to salt throughout, or at least at the beginning. I love Steve Sando. Have you met him?
I've never met him. No, I would love to meet him.
I want to meet him. It's not just because I want to be in his club.
He's like a celebrity in my world. And by my world, I mean my home.
Yeah, your home. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
A few more questions. I want to know, your favorite food is ice cream. Is that real, or is that just from Twitter?
No, that's
or
real.
Or your website. Okay.
No, that's totally real. Like, isn't everyone's favorite food ice cream?
No, but that's okay. I love it. So tell me why ice cream. You've actually covered ice cream quite a bit in the New York Times. Now it makes sense.
I really love ice cream. Yeah.
What makes good ice cream? Okay, we'll get there. Let's go there.
What makes good ice cream?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's too big a question. It's like you're asking me about God.
I know.
Anyway, what makes good ice cream? I love ice cream that is very creamy, and I don't like delicate flavors. I mean, I do like delicate flavors, but I'm totally cool with ice cream just like beating you over the head with the flavors. Like, I used to live quite close to the first Ample Hills location.
Yeah. In Gowanus or Park Slope?
In the one on Vanderbilt in Prospect Heights. I used
Heights,
to live near there, and oh man, I would go there a lot. Yeah. And and then Gowanus open and we go there. Anyway, so that really creamy, lots of mix-ins, not super sweet, I'm not like a Cold Stone person, but that sort of silky, super premium,
Mm-hmm.
I like eggy ice cream too, not Philadelphia style. I like an eggy, yeah.
I love that, and I love that your team mix in. Your team like Ben and Jerry's not, you like the chunky stuff.
Yeah. Hey, look, like the pandemic gave me time to meditate on things like what's my preferred vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
And like you really kind of can't beat Haagen-Dazs.
Haagen-Dazs.
I know, right? Have you had the Ben and Jerry's vanilla?
I have. It's not good.
Specific brands.
I will. It's not good.
But like also like Haagen-Dazs chocolate peanut butter, like. So good.
I interviewed Ina Garten long ago, and she said she melts down a full pint of Haagen-Dazs to make creme anglaise. It's like basically the same thing.
Oh my God.
I think that's genius, and I think that is the perfect ice cream, the Haagen-Dazs vanilla.
She's so fabulous. Just hearing that just made my heart beat a little faster.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do.
She's great.
She is great.
She's great, and she's got books coming along. She's just a real national treasure. Emily, we're doing Anna and I are going to riff about banned words.
Okay.
Because we have our list of banned words on Taste. Do you have a banned word list for the New York Times?
Oh, I thought you meant band, B-A-N-D.
Okay, so I'll do that again.
And I was like, are you naming your band?
Banned words. Like the words that are banned, like we do not, like one of them is unctuous. We just cannot print the word unctuous in Taste. Like unctuous is not happening. Like it is, there's like something we put into our CMS where it does not allow. This
is a great question, in part because we were talking about this not so long ago in the Food Desk Slack channel at work. We have a Slack channel, as everyone does. So my colleague Patrick Farrell, who is an editor on food and like a longtime editor.
Shout out to Patrick Farrell, of course.
Shout out to, do you know Patrick?
I've never met Patrick Farrell. I know of him, and he's an amazing editor.
He is an amazing editor.
Yeah.
I've heard it said that he is one of the best editors of the New York Times, and like I believe that. And also Patrick is just like a lovely colleague and a generous soul.
Yeah.
He's just amazing. So anyway, Patrick, longtime editor, has a list of words that he does not want in the food section. And it came to light recently that Priya Krishna, who has worked with Patrick for a really long time now, he's been our editor for a long time, like kept a running list of those words. Words Patrick hates. Or anyway, so if I'm remembering right, okay, Lux, foodie, We don't like foodie. Oh my God. Luscious also we try to avoid. Luscious does get in. Lux, however, is totally banned. Oh my God. I need to think of other ones. I'm so sorry. I can't think of
those. Are really good
head.
ones. I think Lux and Luscious. I think Moist is definitely on the edge. I mean, Moist means something specific, so we have to print it. But our other one, I think, is Bistro, when referring to a restaurant that is not a French origin bistro, just calling it like a Vietnamese bistro.
Or calling a restaurant a concept.
Oh my God. Please.
Like banned,
Banned.
It's a restaurant or a deli. Like that's like use a noun, use a different noun. Concepts. So the Times actually in the style book doesn't want you to use the word launch, even for a website. Launching is for rockets. It is not for companies.
Digital media.
It is not for restaurant concepts. So one thing you won't see in the New York Times, unless it has snuck through, is the idea that you would like launch a restaurant or launch a takeout business.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I think of along the lines, I think a program, when you say something has a program, like a really excellent olive oil program.
Yeah.
Not happening.
We don't really do that. I think we do wine program. I'm pretty sure we do wine program, but no more programming. And also, at some point, curators left the world of the arts and moved throughout the world of
culture. Word.
Yes.
Emily, we ask all guests on the Taste Podcast if there was a dream food book or cookbook project that you could work on personally without a deadline or a budget. It was just you and this project. What would that cookbook be?
So, and partly this is COVID, right? But I think I would have said this anyway. Like, what I want to do is I would want it to be a book or some other project where I just travel around the world eating and like at a totally leisurely pace. And I just go for as long as I need to go. And like, I'm like, bye. I have to go. It's for this project. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I have to go travel around the world and eat at a leisurely pace. That is totally what I would want to do. The other one, so I love sweets. I mean, we just talked about ice cream for a while, but I really, really love to bake. And ever since I was a kid, I have the craziest sweet tooth. I did always think like, oh, it'd be really fun to do like a pastry course, like to really learn how to bake in that kind of way. And it would be really awesome to work on a cookbook, like a baking cookbook, where everything was delicious and really tasty, and it magically just turned out great like the first time. And there was not a lot of like extensive testings or revision, and just like a magical book of treats that I baked and recipes. And, so I'm not a recipe developer, right? I don't do that. And I have such reverence for that work. It is so hard to do that work well. I have so much admiration for the great cookbook authors I know, the recipe writers I know, the ones I don't know and I really admire, right? So I don't think I could write that dessert book, but in a magic plane. Yeah. Like, yes, that is what I would do.
I love that answer. It's like you want to have the perfect brownie, but like on the first shot, not the like 17th Doris Greenspan, like 17th draft, which is obviously what it takes her to do it.
Yeah. Oh my God. She's a legend.
She's a legend.
Yeah.
Emily Weinstein, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Anna, at Taste, we work with words basically all the time. When we aren't recording podcasts, we're typically in front of our computers, hammering away at newsletters, articles, tweets, all the written stuff that you see in the pages of Taste. This is to say, Anna, that we take our words extremely seriously. It's also to say that there are certain words that we have effectively banned from the pages of Taste.
That's right. And there are lots of reasons as an editor to ban a word. Sometimes it's offensive. Sometimes it's a cliche because we're reading food writing all the time. And sometimes these cliches just pop out at us. And sometimes it's just a word that feels kind of gross and like we can't get over it.
Not delicious, the opposite of tasty.
Yeah, sometimes there are these words that just like are like nails on a chalkboard basically to an editor. So what's an example of a banned word in your minds that you're always going to cross out from a draft?
I have a word, but I want to back up and say on the note of cliche, I had an editor who called it out one time in an edit. Yeah, that's a cliche. And I felt kind of bad at the moment. But then I was like, man, that was actually really great that he, or I can't remember who he or she had acknowledged this. And so I started doing it as an editor pretty rigorously. And I feel like I'm passing on that gift. I think I have a good tone with most writers. But when you get called out for a cliche, it's actually really nice in writing.
Yeah, it sort of like challenges our writing muscles to work a little bit harder.
Exactly. Like we lean into we have muscle memory for certain words. So, but for me, this isn't a cliche. It's just a really, 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 really bad word. It's called, it's not called. It is the word unctuous.
Yuck.
Yuck. So by definition, unctuous means oily or having a greasy or soapy feel.
That's like Merriam-Webster definition. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was like actually the definition.
Exactly.
That's disgusting.
That's the definition. It has nothing to do with food or delicious food. Oftentimes that word is used when referring to a meat item having oil or having like a great mouthfeel, also a banned word. And people use it and it is gross. It's disgusting.
I'm with you there.
How about you, Anna? What's one of your banned words?
So this is one that I didn't even really like realize was a bad cliche until Kathy Irway wrote a story about it for Taste a few years ago. And that is using the word soy as shorthand for soy sauce. It happens all the time, like restaurant menus, recipe head notes, chefs cooking something on TV. They'll just mention like making a sauce with soy and garlic and honey, for instance. But as Kathy points out, soy as a plant is actually one of the largest industrial products in the world. And it's used for so many things, like I think like car seats even, and like livestock feed. And even in the food world, soy can make up so many different tastes and textures. It's like every style of tofu comes from the soy plant. Edamame comes from it. Soy sauce, miso. There are hundreds of ingredients that come from this plant. So sort of realizing that, I realized how lazy it is to just say soy when we really mean soy sauce.
Soy sauce. And I think that made that edit many times since that wonderful piece by Kathy. And it's like definitely just respect for the soybean and how it's integrated into our lives. And you use the word lazy, and that might come off as a little aggressive. But I believe that writers need to be pushed. And as you said, the muscle memory sometimes needs to be challenged. And there's definitely moments where writers will file a draft where it's like, definitely they were listening to themselves talk or the Food Network talk, and they think that's the voice that we want to have on Taste, and it's not really great in a reading experience.
Totally. I mean, when you're reading a word, you want it to be specific and accurate.
Yeah. So in 2018, James Hansen wrote a story for Taste called "Why Does Every Recipe Have to Be Magic?" which was great. And he wrote, "A tried and tested recipe isn't good enough. We need the unexpected, the revelatory, the remarkable." Just this past week, New York Times food editor Sam Sifton wrote that the combination of Chinese 5-by salt, chicken stock, and star anise was, quote unquote, pretty magic on some pressure cooker chicken legs destined for a grilled cheese. Roasted canard with hot cheese between bread hardly requires a spell book, and yet here we are. What a great line from James. I feel like he went in pretty hard on the idea of magic. What do you think about the use of the word magic in food writing?
I totally get why people use it, because in a lot of ways, cooking is like magic. You're combining these ingredients, sometimes even in a cauldron, And
a pot of spells. Yeah.
And sometimes like something really beautiful and unexpected comes out of it. So I get why people associate it with magic, but also I'm so tired of reading that word when it comes to recipes.
And in the piece, I believe Hansen interviewed Sonia Chopra, now Bon Appetit, and she had a great reasoning. Calling your crispy chicken grounded or subject to scientific realities of applying heat to proteins wouldn't be the clickiest bait despite its highly practical approach. I think that was great.
It's true, yeah. The idea of magic is much more compelling.
So let's do a speed round. What are you thinking? Are there some other banned words?
Totally. Okay, so addictive, we don't really use at taste, partially just because I think it undermines the experience of addiction. So that's a banned word for us. Another one, just like is out of my own personal taste, the word toothsome, I really don't like. It's overused and it's usually misused. The definition is really just about something that's delicious or like really appealing, but people use toothsome often to refer to like the texture and having a little bit of a bite or like a chew to it. So that's another banned one for me. Another one that's popped up a lot recently is the word frizzled when people mean fried.
You're so annoyed by this. We had a long Slack conversation recently about the frizzled versus fried. You were really, really frustrated that day.
If any listeners actually know for a fact that frizzled means something different than fried, please let me know. Otherwise, I mean, let's just call it fried if it's fried.
Let's go with fried.
Yeah. All right. So speed round. What are a few more of yours?
I have a few that come to mind, but they're always popping up. But one is Bistro. I think Bistro is great for the French restaurant of the Provence of France, and like it comes from France, and there's definitely some kind of French connection. But like calling it a Vietnamese bistro, a modern Indian bistro, banned. I don't like the word gastro being used in certain like in phrases like. Gastro pub was something that was popular in the early 2000s. I feel gastro is just not that appealing, though I like Gastro Obscura. I think that's actually a good name. So they get the pass as a brand. I also I don't like moist. I think it comes back to that word. I feel like saying it out loud even, but also seeing it in writing. I know it's specific, and like in baking recipes particularly, you want to emphasize the outcome of the sheet cake recipe is a moist cake. But is there anything that we could say instead of moist, Anna? What do you think?
I don't know. It's so hard because cakes especially are something very specifically that you usually don't want them to be wet, except for like maybe with a tres leches cake or like a similar style cake that's sort of like soaked. But moist does kind of describe the texture of really good cake well. So it's so hard.
I don't think it's banned from taste.
All right. So moist is back on the list.
Back on the list. So if you've written moist in on a taste article, you're safe. Thanks, Anna. It was nice talking to you.
The Taste Podcast is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Anna Hezel. The show is produced by Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Our theme music is by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for listening.